A reading from the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verses 12 through 19. Because of this, the king flew into a violent rage and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. The decree was issued, and the wise men were about to be executed, and they looked for Daniel and his companions to execute them. Then Daniel responded with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the king's chief executioner, who had gone out to execute the wise men of Babylon. He asked Arioch, the royal official, "Why is the decree of the king so urgent?" Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. So Daniel went in and requested that the king give him time, and he would tell the king the interpretation. The king's had a dream, FYI. Then Daniel went to his home and informed his companions, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions with the rest of the wise men of Babylon might not perish. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night, and Daniel blessed the God of heaven. So I had a vision of a spreadsheet that showed that we were going to be in Daniel for 14 weeks. So we're going to be here for some time. We have lots of time to talk about it. I listened to the sermons from the last 2 weeks. I've been teaching kids for several months, and I was like, oh, adults, listen to adults talk. It was really interesting. Although the kids are pretty interesting too. I've always read Daniel as like a combination of kids' stories, right? And y'all have mentioned this. And then like a source of some end times apocalyptic wisdom. And so you're supposed to approach it like, get the morals out of it. And then also you're supposed to be like an end times detective, an apocalyptic detective. You're supposed to be able to figure out exactly what it means and all the signs and all that stuff, right? But since we're going to be in Daniel for a while, I was just, rereading it and looking at it again. And it started to sound a little bit like an adventure movie to me, like movies that I love. Because we have a hero. His name is Daniel. He's outnumbered. He's in exile. He's in a foreign land. He's oppressed. He has a group of true companions. There's a dragon, the king, right? And then another dragon later. They go on quests. There are dreams to interpret. There are weird diets to adhere to, statues not to bow down to, all that kind of thing. And then at the end of every quest, they find something called an elixir. They either get more wisdom or help and protection for the people of Israel, or hope for people, more power in the kingdom. And if this sounds familiar, it's probably because it is. There's a guy named Joseph Campbell, and he was an author who was born in the early 1900s. And he started comparing Native American mythology with Christian mythology and other religious mythology. And he realized that over and over again, no matter what time period you look at, no matter what culture you look at, there's something called a monomyth, an overarching story structure that you just see over and over again. He called it a hero's journey. And so we've talked a lot at different times about how maybe American culture is more like individualistic. So you might think, oh, well, it's the hero's journey because Americans are really self-centered and we always think we're the heroes. But actually, you see the same story structure across all kinds of cultures because we are all like the heroes of our own lives, whether we want to like see ourselves that way or not. And part of the reason that is that only you can understand like your interior self and your interior thoughts. Like you can't really understand someone else's interior thoughts. So in a sense, we are kind of like alone in our story at a very, very, very deep level, if that makes sense. And so we always, no matter what kind of culture we're in or group we're in, we still kind of see ourselves as the hero because it's the only way we can see ourselves. It's not because we're terrible people. So I want to show you what the hero's journey looks like. Okay. This is always what it looks like. This is kind of a simplified version, and I don't know if you can see it, but okay, you can. Okay, so you're a person. You receive a call to adventure. This could be like, I mean, we see it a lot in the Bible, like Moses. Moses gets his call to adventure. God's like, go do this. Get supernatural aid. Maybe this is the burning bush. He crosses this threshold. He gets some helpers like Aaron, maybe some mentors, like maybe his father-in-law, different things like that. He gets challenges and temptations. Then there's a revelation that usually happens at the low point of the story, where there's a death and a rebirth. And on the other side of so there's new information that the hero gets. And then on the other side of getting that new information, they are transformed into something that they were not when they started the journey. We don't really see this in Daniel, because Daniel's a pretty, okay dude, but after this transformation, then there's atonement. So like, if they were a jerk over here, now they have like come to realize they were a jerk, and they're like, I'm sorry. Okay, and they bring back something called the gift of the goddess, which is just like a general thing, or the elixir, right? The thing that they went looking for in the beginning. And now here they are again, ready to start their circle. Does this look like anything else that we talk about to anyone else? A spiritual thing, a circle, perhaps a kairos moment. Yeah? Yay. Okay, so we would frame it like a kairos moment, and we kind of understand that too. So see, overarching story structure that's always there. So how does this look? It actually happens over and over in Daniel, but specifically in chapter 2, since that's where we are, the king has had a dream, and he calls all of his wise men together, and he wants not just an interpretation of the dream, but he wants them to tell him what the actual dream was as a test. And they all say, oh, that's too difficult. We can't do that. And he's really mad. And so he's going to execute everybody. So the royal official goes to Daniel and is like, I'm here to kill you. Daniel's like, wait a minute. And this is his call to adventure. This is the call to adventure that Daniel gets. There's a problem that needs to be solved. At this point, he's just a guy who knows really good dieting tricks. But now he's been called up, okay, to potentially save this group of wise men from being executed, right, along with himself. And the first thing he does after he gets permission to, give it a little time, see if he can figure out the dream, is he goes to his true companions, and those are his allies. He forms his team. He's like, Avengers Assemble. And they've kind of had their moment in chapter 1, where they're we get to know that they're friends in chapter 1, but here we see that they are companions, that they live together, that he is still calling them by their Jewish names, right? They're close. And he says, let's beseech the God of heaven. Let's all pray really hard. And so they pray really hard. They're going into the abyss, and overnight, in the night, Daniel gets this revelation, and he's reborn the next day as not just a guy with good diet tips, but a guy who can see and interpret visions from God. Okay. And he, again, like I said, he doesn't have to atone for anything. So he just takes this back to the king. It's not up there, but he takes it back to the king. And in the story, the elixir could either be the vision, or it could be the fact that Daniel brought hope to people who were about to die. He averted a crisis or a disaster, right? So that's what happens in Daniel 2. And then in Daniel 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego go on their own little hero's journey. Then Daniel continues to go on more hero's journeys. And yeah. Okay. It happens over and over again. And the whole book culminates in Daniel ultimately not just being a guy who can interpret visions, but a guy who has an extremely hopeful and comprehensive vision for his people. So instead of just being like diet guy who can interpret dreams, he's now really powerful guy who has this vision that gives hope, not just to the people of Israel, but to all of us for all time. So it's like this continuous progression of the hero's journey over and over again. Does that make sense? Yay. Let's see. So what I want to focus on just today is that in chapter 2, he forms his company of true companions, and that's actually like a TV trope, right? Like, you know, your ensemble cast, and you have your smart aleck one, and you have your quiet one, your one that knows a lot. Okay, and they all get together, and there's diversity, and they're blended together behind a common mission or a vision, and their diversity strengthens them. And so for any hero on a journey, it is very important to have true companions. So here's some examples of true companions. There you go. Any Star Trek. You have Dorothy. Okay, there. And, you know, usually true companions are found family, but in this case, they actually are family, which is like a weird twist. Okay.
Spoiler.
Sorry. If you didn't know, you know. The Mighty Ducks. Oh, and here, you know, we even have it in the title, The Fellowship of the Ring, the true companions. There they go. Right. Oh, yeah. I thought the Mighty Ducks are very important. Yeah, there you go. Ducks fly together, whatever. Okay. There you go. And then my favorite example, my very favorite example, of course, would be the Fast and the Furious.
All right, y'all, come on, let's
so you
do
have to
this.
turn it up. Turn it
Hey,
up.
woman, bless our table.
Father, thank you for the gathering of friends. Father, we give thanks for all the choices we've made because that's what makes us who we are. Let us forever cherish the loved ones we've lost along the way. Thank you for the little angel, the newest addition to our family. Thank you for bringing Letty home. And most of all, thank you for fast cars. All right, y'all.
Thank you for fast cars. There you go. Yeah. So there's lots of true companions. Lots of examples of true companions. And true companions are important. If the hero's journey is ultimately about transformation, and the fact that there's always allies or true companions kind of tells us that in order to be transformed, we have to have some type of band of companions, you know, that in some way we're focused not on, like, we're not focused necessarily on the hero, but we're focused on some common goal, something that we can band together for, right? So there's like, the hero's journey can take a lot of different twists and turns. So maybe, and hero kind of has a connotation that somehow the person who's going through the journey is the person who's right. But actually, it could be that you start out and there's a call to adventure. You realize that, oh, actually, I grew up really racist and there's a problem and I need to resolve that. And you enlist allies along the way. You are tested, you develop competencies in dismantling your racist ideas. You might figure out, okay, what do I need to do? And then you are reborn as a person who is, you know, less racist, or who is actively pursuing the dismantling of racism. And so it's not, the hero's journey is not necessarily about you always being right. It's about you being transformed, right? And so why do we see this over and over and over again? Did anybody watch the TV show Dexter? Did you have feelings about the end of it? Okay. The first one. The first one. Okay, I won't say anything. It's basically it's yeah, so the end of it, like over the series, he's like, even though he's, a sociopath and not supposed to have relationships. Yes.
Waiting.
Yeah, you're like, it's gonna happen. But he develops, his band of true companions as much as a sociopath can. And then eventually, instead of being transformed into anything better, he's just transformed into a guy who like sits in a cabin all day and stares at the wall. And it was a highly unsatisfactory ending. He lost all of his companions. He did not become anything better. He just became lonely and staring at a wall. And people hated it. Oh, they hated it. Because when you invert, like when you start to mess around with the hero's journey, it really like gets at people's core. Like they don't want to watch stories where there's like no hope. And you, on one hand, you could say, well, that's just a reflection of the fact that we always want to be happy. But what? Breaking Bad, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like in a way, it can be fun to watch it if that's like the story and you watch it. But if the ending is really like, you're kind of like, if the ending just keeps going down, you don't feel right, And I think part of that is because the hero's journey is about ordinary people being able to make a difference where they are, no matter how bad things are. There is always a call to adventure. There are always allies. There's always a way to die and be reborn. There's trials, there's transformation and hope. And I think that story, that overarching story, and our like need for that story is present because that's who God is. Like, it's not about us always wanting to be happy. It's present because that's who God is. God wants to see the ordinary transformed into the extraordinary. God feels joy in that. And so, like, if we think about how God's put eternity in our hearts, I think about that's the story that God's put in our hearts, is that we can be transformed, that we can help our communities, that we can have hope. So, thoughts? How's that hitting you? What parallels do you see? What thoughts do you have? If you want the green man, you can have it. I pushed the button, Ryan. Is that right?
Hello. Yep. I couldn't help but think of like Indiana Jones movies while you were talking about the hero's journey. So that's just a random thought. But yeah, like it felt like what I hear you saying, like it's like kind of like with your example of Dexter, it's like there's a reason we don't like to only get halfway around the circle. Like if a story ends there, I'm like, why did I read this book, kind of thing. It's really interesting thought, what you're saying, that like God made us that way, or like, like our need for a story that goes all the way around is because of who God is and what he's made for us, what he wants for us. That's really striking to me. And I'm reminded of like the story of Jesus, right? They're like, it was really sad when everyone thought that like the story was over and he was in the ground, right? Mm-hmm. But the story of Jesus doesn't end there, and the Gospels don't end there. And I can see kind of what you're saying in that too. Mm-hmm. That's all. Thanks.
So, first of all, I love that you took
a detail from this story that I think I just read right past so often and made that the thing to hang on for this is the fact that Daniel goes to his friends and builds his team and then goes from there. I don't know, it's just like, that's always, I don't know, it's like, I forget that that's part of it. And yet that's like, that's so central to this journey in the story. And then even connecting that to what happened right before, where he was like, yeah, go tell the king we've got this.
Mhm.
And then he went and told his friends, he was like, okay, guys, we've got this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But you know, that trust that he had, not in God, yes, but also in his core, in his
Yeah.
group, that you know, it's not just the hero's journey alone, it's the team, it's
Mhm.
everyone together. I don't know, I like that.
Yeah. Oh, Brian, guys. Oh, John wants it. Either way. John?
Yeah, for me, this was a typical Sarah sermon. I was greatly engaged in the story and following along, having a good old time and going, what in the Dickens has got to do with God and the Bible and Christianity? In the very end, she ties it all down and brings it home with 3 words: God feels joy. And I went, what? That's amazing. Well, it's true. It's kind of like Aesop's fables, you know. Oh, there's a story, and then here is the lesson that's buried in the story. God feels joy about ordinary to extraordinary and transformation of individuals, and brings the community. Says, "Wow, what a neato anchor!" In the it really it puts a bow on a beautiful package. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
So I was thinking, what does it mean when I'm expecting things to stop mid-circle?
Mm.
I'm like, yeah. Humans are the worst,
Mhm.
worst case scenarios, and that's the end of the story. Really, that is what I'm sitting with. What does it mean when I don't have hope that we're gonna complete the circle? I'm like, yeah, we suck.
Mhm.
We're the worst.
I think it's okay. At the abyss part, you don't have hope. And I think that's like hope. One of the things to know about hope in this circle is like hope comes and goes.
Yeah.
And just because it goes doesn't mean it won't come back. Just because it comes back doesn't mean it won't go again. But there's like, yeah, there's like that death and rebirth that happens at the very lowest point. And we have time for it to happen. We have time to be where we are.
I think it's important to remember too that completing the circle doesn't mean wrapping it up in a
Right.
bow, from a 4. It doesn't mean that
Yep.
like we're completing the circle and that was
Yep.
pretty, that's done, and now we're moving on. Like I think completing the circle can be brutal, and just like it was with the crucifixion. And I was telling Sarah, I was like, a lot of parallels with Harry Potter, a little disappointed. A little disappointed it wasn't brought up, but
Yeah.
I'll suggestion
Sorry.
box it later.
I
But
can show you, there's a whole thing where someone's taken Harry Potter and done the hero's journey, Harry Potter and like 6 other movies, and just like
yes, it's hard
pretty
to remember
trippy,
them
but-
all, but that one, anyway, I just feel like in that one it's the end is the worst part, and it still doesn't wrap up in like a beautiful package. Like there's still so much wreckage and damage and loss,
Yep.
and they go back and remember like everything that they lost. So I have to be reminded too that completing the circle does not mean that we are wrapping anything up
Yep.
in a beautiful package bow, and that and then completing that circle means that everything is now complete or better, that there is time to reflect on what you lost in that circle, because I think there is usually, like you said, that there's sacrifice and
Yep.
things like that.
That's exactly it. It's like Daniel does it just over and over and over again. And like in stories, somehow you can either do it all one gigantic or you can do it round, around, around, around. Yes. That's right.
To continue the Reese Debbie Downer.
It's
One thing that always makes me nervous about the hero's journey, and not that you're suggesting this, but
No, it's okay. I didn't.
yeah,
Go
that
ahead.
I think because of our American exceptionalism
For sure.
and our need for the spectacular,
Yep.
that we locate the hero's journey or our lack of involvement in a hero's journey in something that's amazing, when oftentimes, more times than not, this cycle of being invited into something and experiencing the abyss and the death and being transformed is just really ordinary small stuff.
Yep.
And that so much of Christianity, I feel like, sort of puts this pressure on, what's the amazing thing that you're going to do for God today. And sometimes like the hero's journey is just being less of a jerk today than it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. That and it's even the category of the hero. We think of Daniel, we think of Harry Potter, we think of these amazing things where I think of people, anyone who's trying to raise children. This is going to stress you out, but you'll be great. Like just staying alive sometimes is a miracle, and just getting to the next day. That sometimes just being there. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to do great. You're going to do great. Yeah, your kids are going to change the world, I'm sure.
Easy for you.
It's super easy. Yeah, that sometimes just like getting to the next day and starting over, it is a part of the transformation.
Yes. Yeah. And the hero's journey does not depend on size,
Yes.
and it does not depend. I mean, like I said, the word hero kind of.
And I also would change the word, because in our American minds, heroes, something, it's almost like we need just another, like, you're right, it's not.
Yeah. One of the ways that they try to subvert that. Okay, so like in the original Star Wars trilogy, like Luke Skywalker, he's someone who's no one who ends up being someone important, right? Well, years and years later, when they make the final trilogy, you got Rey, and we're like, she's got to be someone important. And then for a while, she's no one important because she's subverting the trope. Because sometimes, sometimes the journey we need to go on as heroes is learning that we're not important. It's still the same story structure, but we're learning that we're not important or not amazing. We still need true companions to help us learn that too. Sometimes that's our kids. So.
Yeah. I was thinking about, like how we have, children's stories where we just, have nice and tidy little begins and ends to these stories. And I think about Moses and being a tool for God to deliver the people of Israel from the Egyptians. And then they crossed the Red Sea and we're like, he did it. Yeah. But that's not really it just keeps going, because then they're like, WTF, Moses, why are we out here wandering in the desert for 40 years? This is the worst. We should go back. Yeah, we wrap things up with a bow to make it look like, oh, see, God delivered the Israelites. Look at that. But it's always still in the middle of stress and chaos, and it's not really pretty.
Yeah,
Actually,
it is.
They didn't know this.
You were so different.
I think the thing that I've been wondering, I don't know, I feel I'm not a 4, but this feels very 4 to identify with the abyss part of, of the circle. I think it resonates with why we gravitated to Daniel, like feeling like apocalyptic literature was great for our dumpster fire location. And like feeling like the church is in some sense of abyss. That, this pandemic has been an abyss. And so, I mean, that's not anything new. We live with those realities. I guess what I'm wondering, and what the Campbell's framework highlights for me is what is the transformation that this crisis or these crises are inviting us into.
Mhm.
And you don't always choose the transformation. Like we don't change ourselves all the way, but I mean, we do participate in that. We can opt into it or whatever. And I think one of the weaknesses of the hero's journey is the individualist frame.
Mhm.
Campbell is an individualist, and he's imposing that framework on these mythic stories that are much more communal. So I want to ask, like, what's the communal transformation that this crisis is inviting us into? I don't know the answer, but I think like I want the resolution, I want the breakthrough,
Mhm.
and I forget that the pathway to that is our transformation. Like
Yeah,
what's the transformation that this abyss is inviting us into?
yeah.
Anyway.
Mhm.
I was thinking many things along these same lines of, um, like, I think even as parents, there's times where our kids are, I don't know, dreading something, or like Chloe starting junior high and she's just like, is it going to be okay? Is it going to, am I going to make friends? Am I going to make this team? Will these people be nice? Just all these questions. And like, it's very tempting as a parent to want to be like, yes, like you'll go through these hard times and then you'll see this, thing at the end where like, really, I can't give them that promise of like,
Mhm.
at the end, you'll see that it was all fine and worth it and you'll find your place. And like, I don't have that ability to guarantee that promise, like that you'll see the dream interpreted and you'll be able to deliver the clear message. And like that part of, and I think even I feel so overwhelmed when I hear reminders of like they were in the desert for 40 years. It's like the hero's journey's got to go like this, man. Like I want it delivered in a couple-hour movie.
Yeah.
And so I think is when I'm reflecting on my own journeys and trying to like lead children now through a journey, that we can really only focus on and or semi-control the formation and transformation of what is happening within ourselves. So like, I don't know when we're going to see like this full cycle or circle, and I don't know what that's going to look like. But I do know that there's something about what's happening even in the abyss that's transformative, even when we don't like it. And I often think in this story, like, what if Dino hadn't gotten the interpretation of the dream? Like, then what? Because that's a real reality too of like, well, then then you're just SOL. And so I don't know. And that's, as humans, that's kind of more of the tension we sit in of like, that might not happen. And even if we are one of the casualties of the final battle in Harry Potter or whatever, I don't know where that leaves us on the hero. Like what happens to those people in the journey? They don't make it to the end of the hero's journey, but somehow that's still, even if you don't see the beautiful ending, that process still has to matter somehow because it's a lot of people's stories.
Yeah.
Like Forrest Gump. But at the end of that film, he's still sitting on a stinking log. Like wondering, and he's caught in that crossroads of like, I can't remember what it was, but he's like, maybe both are happening at the same time.
Mhm.
Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I get tired of like the circle. I just get tired. I'm like, I think once you recognize it, it's like I've thought about this for a long time. I learned, well, in software development. There's the waterfall method where you do like all your design up front. Then you do all your creating. Then you do all your testing. and like, well, Ted knows. Or then there's like a more circular where you're researching just a little bit, and then you're developing a little bit, then you're testing a little bit, then you're refining a little bit, and you go around. And I like thought about that a lot as like how it compares to my life. I'm like, honestly, I'm tired of the circles sometimes. Like, I'm really tired of it. I'm really tired of knowing that the hope will go and the hope will come back. And I'm like, why can't it just stay? I'm so exhausted. So yeah, there's like definitely, it's not all roses. There's like tough things. Yep. Yep. John, would you like to share?
Yes, please. I live across the street from the Ennis High School. When I do my walk, I look out this gigantic stadium. And sometimes I think, okay, what happens? Well, Friday nights in the fall, a few dozen young boys go out there and knock their lights out and do all these amazing things. But there's thousands and thousands of people that are out there to look at them and cheer them. That's a reflection of there's something inside of the spectators that get jazzed about watching people play a sport. In our itty bitty town, was it not true for the Cowboys and professional teams? And my golly molly, what about soccer worldwide? There are 100,000, there are stadiums that seat 100,000 people to watch a soccer game. So something inside of us that likes to watch spectacular things like the Olympics. Also here in my neighborhood, with these 70, 80-year-old women, about every year or two, there's a box of paperback books that show up for people to take away. These ladies love to read romantic novels. They'll go through dozens of romantic novels and they'll give them to each other. So what is, there's something inside the ladies that want to get involved in that. There's something in us that's touched by those things, like the heroic journey. Lastly, there's one classic radio station. How many pop radio stations are there? How many country radio stations are there? Why isn't polka, like it is here, is super popular? Because it doesn't resonate in us. There's something deep in the soul that resonates with the hero's journey in Wizard of Oz and Star Trek and elsewhere. So it's an indicator of our soul's DNA, shall we say. Pass.
Okay, let me pray for us. Is that okay? God, thank you so much for your word, for the stories in it, for the ways that they cause us to question our lives, the ways that they cause us to feel hope, the ways that they transform us. God, we do pray for strength and wisdom along the way, whether we want to go or not. We are in this world and we've been called to the adventure of being your people in it. I pray that you would provide us with true companions along the way, that you would allow that to us to be that for each other in the ways that we can, that you would guide us through the abyss, that you would lead us safely back. God, that you would give us hope. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.